Hallo und willkommen zurück zum Logtech Podcast. Oder sollte ich lieber sagen, welcome back. Denn heute haben wir tatsächlich unsere erste internationale Folge. Und zwar auf Englisch. Wenn du lieber deutsche Folgen hören möchtest, dann ist das kein Problem, keine Sorge. In Zukunft, das heißt ab der nächsten Woche, sind wir natürlich wieder wie gewohnt mit deutschen Folgen unterwegs. Wenn du jetzt aber die englische Folge hören möchtest, dann wünsche ich dir ganz viel Spaß dabei. So today we have a special guest because it's our first English episode. Our guest is Pieter, the CEO and founder of Freightender. Pieter, welcome to the show.
Hi, Stefan. It's a pleasure.
Nice that you're here. Let's start directly into it. Tell us a little bit about Freightender and what it is about.
Freightender is a logistics procurement platform for all modes of transportation. We exist for about 7 years, purely focused at procurement in logistics, and we are growing quite fast at the moment because people are looking for digitized solutions to automate their procurement nowadays.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so sounds interesting. Which types of transports do you cover? Is there any specific area that you do, or is it just any transport?
Yeah, so it's any transport mode, but it's definitely mostly road and ocean. We get a bit more requests for parcel as well, but ocean and road is what we do mostly.
Okay. And is it that you basically take the tender process of the customer and do it digital, or is it that you match direct shipments or carriers with transporters on a shipment level?
Yeah, so we don't do the transactional, let's say transactional operational way of working. It's not a marketplace. So it's really a setup where the shippers invite the carriers that they know, or they take it from a carrier database, and then they invite them to, let's say, a long-term tender for long-term contracting. Well, long-term, of course, is relative because that can be for 6 months or for a year. And nowadays, that's shorter and shorter, I would say.
Okay. So they basically bring all their service providers and invite them to Freightender, but they can also source from your database.
Yes, correct.
Okay, cool. And that's is there any specific area where you do it in, or is it the whole of Europe?
I would say we do it on a global scale, especially when you have ocean. Of course, a lot of different parties are involved, and we have customers in Europe, but also in Australia, Singapore, and US and Canada. But mostly, we see that our customers are coming from Germany, the Benelux, UK, and France.
Okay, so the typical logistics hubs within Europe.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. And what's the story behind it? How did Freightender come to be? How did you come to the idea?
So it's an interesting story. It actually was an idea that came to life within a freight audit organization called Control Pay, which nowadays is owned by Transporium.
Oh.
And within that company, we saw the need for a better procurement platform because we were working with rates, making sure that the rates are uploaded correctly for the freight audit process, the Frachtausschreibungen.
Yes.
And to understand the rates very well, you need to have a certain knowledge. And we saw that whenever rates came in after a tender, a lot of specific things like consolidation rules or weight break calculation, fuel surcharge mechanisms, it was missing from the rates we received. So then the shipper had to go back to the carriers to clarify that. And we understood that in most tools available, this was not really something that was catered for as a functionality in those systems. So we thought, okay, we're going to make a tool where we can actually capture this and build this so shippers can work with a more comprehensive setup so they can actually use this during the tender process. So in 2015, we created this product. In 2016 was live, and we separated this. We spun it off from Control Pay, and then it became a separate company, which I was heading up, and I developed it together with the team to what it is today. So I think we started with about 5 people, and nowadays we are with 20 people.
Okay, very cool. And where are they all located? Do you have any hub where you work, or is it completely remote?
Yeah, we're completely remote, but most of our people are in Ukraine because they're IT people, support staff. But we have people in Germany, in Spain, and in Hungary.
Okay, cool. So also mainly based in Europe, I guess also because of the time delay, right? Or the time zone.
Yes, and it has just grown this way. I don't exclude that we will have more people around the globe, specifically for the different people that we need to serve in those regions.
Mhm.
But yeah, we'll see.
Okay. And I saw you also brought up Tender X, right? Like a separate product within Freightender or next to Freightender. Explain us what that is.
Yes, good question. It is a separate company. It is a separate product as well. We're actually going to integrate it into Freightender. What TenderX is today, it is 2 applications. One is a CRM for logistics service providers, mostly for road.
Mhm.
And the other one is a marketplace where shippers can publish their tender and in this way find new carriers who are interested in quoting to that tender and participating. But also a search engine for new carriers. So not only let's say an internal database, but a database where you can find carriers from outside, and then create your own carrier management setup where you can give carriers ratings and so on.
Uh-huh. And why does it make sense to have it as a separate product or separate company? For me, that would actually totally make sense to integrate it.
Yes. So we have a bit changed our view on that. So first of all, we thought that this is going to be a very, very different dynamic where you would have more carriers as customers and not the shippers. That's still the case, but yeah, we see that it's just better to integrate it completely. Also because the payment model behind it is different. So that's one of the reasons why we separated it, because the payment model is purely based on credit card payments. Because if a carrier, for example, buys a CRM license, he pays 10 euros per month.
Mhm.
Whereas where we work in Freightender today, carriers don't pay anything at all to take part in a tender when they are invited. But the shipper pays either per tender or based on a license fee. But that price is much higher than 10 euros a month.
Yeah.
So and we thought, okay, these are different dynamics. So we're going to make it 2 different products and markets. But in the end, it's very hard to do that. And so now we have decided to bring that back together and create one, let's say, stronger company altogether.
Okay. And what would you say is the typical, maybe you can split it up by Freightender and TenderX, but which is the typical customer?
That's very hard to say because we work with a lot of different customers. So in tendering, we work primarily with shippers, but forwarders also can act as shippers, of course, because large forwarders also buy freight, have subcontractors, so they are also running tenders. So we have them as well as customers, and then we have also consultants who use our platform to run tenders for their customers. So that's a specific group. And within the shipper group, I would say you have the very large companies, like the large multinationals, but you also have the mid-sized companies that you maybe have never heard of. A lot of companies from the Mittelstand in Germany, for example, that these can be big companies, but a lot of people outside Germany may have never heard about them.
Yeah, not
And
even.
Exactly. So, and that's surprising that there are so many companies out there that have very considerable freight spend, have large operations. You could never imagine that they were doing that. And they also need a tender solution, because one of the things that we have noticed is that nowadays, companies that maybe do one tender can be as interested in technology and software as a company that runs 5 tenders per month, for example, just because people value and view technology differently than 20 years ago. And the window of actually doing something is also there, because you see that management is also changing in these companies. So you have a younger generation taking over who wants to push more technology. And I think that's very key for logistics tech companies to actually see those people in such places and making such decisions.
Yeah, I think for me, when I was back at freight forwarding, I was in sales there, so I also took part on a lot of tenders and proposed our rates. And for me, it was always difficult that every customer had a different template, another format. There was nothing standardized. One surcharge for one customer, then another customer is having another surcharge, and same with all the carriers, of course. And do you also bring that into one standardized format, or is it still that every customer has his own template that he uses or rate structure?
Well, interesting question. Before I answer that, just to expand upon your experience, we at some point realized that forwarders are struggling with these bids, and we created a solution to actually manage the incoming bids for those carriers, for the tender managers and the analysts who need to work on the prices. So to streamline that process, that's very much a niche process. But a lot of forwarders are interested in that because it's a very manual process, as you know.
Yeah.
And it is painful, exactly for the reason that you state. It's non-standard. Everybody does their own thing, and everybody thinks their format is the way it should be, and that's it.
Yeah.
And we really try to open the eyes of the shippers and say, well, you need to make sure that your profile actually fits into the flow of goods, the flow of tenders that a forwarder receives. So you need to make it easy for him to quote to your tender to make yourself attractive. You can always debate whether you need to do that in a market where you have very high prices or low prices. But yeah, considering that not being relevant for the discussion, I think that's important, because it doesn't make sense to ask for 20 accessorials if you only use 3 accessorials just for the sake of it. And often you see that people in shipper organizations have inherited a certain file from a predecessor who has created this. And then this file lives on for a very long time, and nobody wants to touch it because there are all kinds of formulas, there are all kinds of things in there, and people have not a good understanding. So it's up to the forwarders to either not say anything and just put in an enormous amount of efforts to fill that in, or to say, hey, look, what are you doing? This doesn't make any sense. This is not needed. This actually will make it more expensive for you, and so on. But that's a role that we happily take, because we see that we need to be an advocate for the forwarders as well, because tendering is basically a dance that comes back every year. And it's just a bit ridiculous that you have different files and a non-match on these items. And people on the shipper side, they often don't think about the fact that you may receive in a week 10 tenders, all completely different, with very short deadlines, a lot of clarifications, a lot of stress, and on top of that, when you tell, for example, shippers that the average global air or ocean tender would cost a forwarder between 10 to 15,000 euros to actually fill it in with all the manpower involved, and the eyes really go open, because they really cannot imagine that. Somehow they believe that it's just some magic button that's being pushed and the rates are there. And of course, forwarders would love to have that, but it's not that simple.
Yeah.
And that's really something that the shippers are not well aware of. So we try to change that, definitely.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that these tender templates are passed on from manager to manager and to the successor, because you cannot imagine how many different tenders I had in my hands that had some issues in the formula, and then you as a freight forwarder, you tell that to the shipper because you want to quote correctly, but I guess most of them they take it to notice, but they don't change the template because next year it's the same error again. And so you can be really sure that even the comparison is not correct because others who do not flag that error in the formula, they just enter all the information and then it's summed up incorrectly and they get nominated by accident, more or less. So yeah, that's also part of the manual process. And I mean, I can understand that the needs for all the shippers are different. So the templates might look also different, but they must not look that different that they are today, or at least a few years ago. How is it the discussion with the multinational corporates? I mean, you won't blame your customers now, but how are these discussions running if you're telling them you need to be more attractive for the freight forwarders or the carriers? Do they actually inherit that, or is it like I'm a big multinational corporate, I don't care, they need to work for me anyway?
I think it's less of the latter. I've had such conversations in the past, but it's a long time ago where people say, "Well, I don't care. I mean, they're just suppliers, and they need to act the way we tell them to."
Yeah.
I'm sure that there are people out there that think like that, but it's not constructive. And I think that logistics has taken a different place into the corporate environment than in landscape that it has before. So people are more aware that they need to somehow see how they can adapt to the situation, because it is eventually very volatile. But I do think it's still for many people an eye opener to all the detail that's behind it in logistics. And I think in general, the insight in how forwarders operate or how carriers operate is really lacking from a shipper point of view, or in general, knowledge about logistics is often lacking because people rotate and so on.
Yeah.
And what I like a lot when you have people who have been on the forwarding side and work on the shipper side, they always have a lot of empathy for the other side. They also know the tricks, and so on, but they also have the empathy because they have been on the other side and they know how hard it is. And so they do take that into account, and that's helpful because the business. If you look at an air or ocean tender, there's so many different components that you can take into consideration, and not everybody can know everything about those specifics. So when you have a partner like us who sits in the middle, eventually we try to make it a good tender exercise for, of course, our customer, but also for the carriers. We want the carriers to be happy with the process and not saying, "Oh, this is such a difficult tool to use, and we have spent 10 extra hours because we didn't get it, and it was wrong, and this and that." We don't want to have it. We want to have it as a smooth process. We, of course, want also carriers to win business. But that's up to the customer. But the process should be very smooth. That's what we are focused at. So our software is really, I would say, a productivity tool. So you gain efficiency with it. And that's the major driver, the major driver or the value of what we offer.
Oh, cool. So also being a benefit for the carrier who's actually bidding.
Yes, because as you have probably also worked with different, let's say, legacy tools that are not really made for logistics, but still process logistics tenders. And it can be really painful to go in such tools, and they're outdated. They look ugly. You don't really understand what you're doing. So if you make a tool that's actually very simple and straightforward and made for logistic service providers, then that's already a big help where things are intuitive and understandable without any training. But that's very important.
Yeah, cool. And I mean, there are other platforms out there. You were talking about Transporia, for example, and they also have their separate module, I think T-contract.
Yeah.
What would you say makes you stand out from the competition, or what is the benefit of working with Freightender?
I would say a couple of things, of course. First of all, we are quite a new platform. Actually, we are going to revamp our platform completely, and we'll have a new application in October, which takes into account easier to use, easier to develop infrastructure, but also a nicer user interface, a better user experience. And what I see with Transporio, what I have heard so far, is that they have, of course, been very successful. I have to say that they're one of the first, especially in the German market, with T contract. So they've been very successful. Have onboarded many customers, but their tool is a legacy tool, and it's not flexible. A lot of people complain about it because it's difficult to work with, and they have a lot of tech debt, I think. So, which means that for them, it's difficult to really adapt their tool to a completely new platform and to really make it easy to work with. So they have a lot of different workarounds. And I would say it's still quite expensive to work with them as well. And that's what companies also complain about. Now, there are, of course, others in the market as well. And I would say a couple of them are definitely older. Others are newer. But we have mainly competition that sits either under private equity or venture capital. And I would say that is that's a big factor, which is negative for the competition and good for us. And what I mean with that is that they're really driven by companies who want to exit the business, who are looking to sell those companies in a certain amount of time, and have a very clear focus at putting a lot of people behind it, and then see how they can get a lot of money from, let's say, the enterprise type of customers, so the large customers, and then sell it off. And the problem with that is that when you put a lot of people in the company, it's not necessarily going to be efficient. And you see that those people are more engaged with meetings. They have their sales divided in different territories, and all the things that come with this. It's not efficient. And we, as a private company without any outside investment, we are very lean, and our decision-making processes are very fast. So that influences the way we can price the customers that we can go after. I mean, for us, it's fine if we have a customer that only does one tender per year. We just give a price for one tender. And if you go to Transporion, they want to sell you a license for a whole year or even for 3 years. Now, for a lot of companies, that is just not suitable. So we are more flexible in that. And I would say we're also more flexible in the way we handle the product. So if we think, okay, we need to add this to the product or we need to develop this, we just do it and we have it within a month. And in those companies, that takes a lot more time, or it will not even happen because they're just too large and it depends on too many decision factors and different people. And a lot of other priorities, especially like in Transporion, which has a lot of different companies in it and is part of a larger group itself, then it's difficult to get those things done in an efficient way.
Yeah, I would fully agree with that on Transporion because, I mean, it's nice that they offer the full suite from tendering, managing transports, doing yard management, whatever. It's all in one suite, but of course it also traps them because it's very hard to actually improve the separate products because they're all linked together. So of course that's like a disadvantage. I would not fully agree saying venture capital makes the companies less flexible or or less innovative. I think it's rather the size, as you said. The bigger the company gets, the slower usually the processes become. the more people have to be, have to be considered when doing any restructuring or having new ideas. More people have to be involved in that. So I would agree that the larger the company, the slower their development gets. But I don't think it's somehow. No, I wouldn't say it's connected to venture capital in that case. But your experience might be different there.
Well, it's definitely the venture capital that provides the money to hire more people.
That's right.
In a lot of cases, and that's what I mean. I mean, what you often see in logistics tech with VC money is that a lot of money is being spent. But then the question is that in the end making a difference? So definitely you can build an organization, you can do a lot of marketing, but still you need to build a company and you need to build the network of customers, and that's a big problem. And if you have worked on the forwarder side, you know how long it can take for customers to make decisions and to integrate new vendors and so on. So whether or not you have venture capital, that is not going to speed up the process in acquiring new customers. And that is, I would say, that is the biggest problem with venture capital and in logistics, is that there is a bottleneck in how many customers actually are going to come your way. And in a lot of, if you are a TMS company or even a freight procurement company, you cannot just handle 50 new customers in 1 month. That's just impossible. Even when you have a lot of people, it's just too much. So there is and you won't get it because you don't have so many companies that are going to make such decisions so fast. So the sales cycles are, I would say, a bottleneck for venture capital. This business.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting view. Definitely. I also see that in logistics, in Germany we say the Mühlen malen etwas langsamer. So the mills are going less fast. So it takes longer for many decisions. That could definitely be a disadvantage. Okay, and how about AI? I mean, it's a topic all around the globe currently, at least if you trust the LinkedIn bubble and all the startup bubbles maybe. How would you rate this? How far is AI to implement it really in daily logistics work, or in your case in procurement?
I would say it's not so far. And I think it's very interesting to look at and to see how you can use it in your own company and towards customers. But it's still going to be on a limited scale. And we are looking at it in terms of software to do certain things in a smarter way based on AI. But that's the investigative phase that we are in. I don't see us implementing it in the next half year because I think the hype is very strong on it. If you indeed look at the LinkedIn bubble, then you think, well, probably in 4 months' time, in the new year, everything will be in AI around us.
Yeah.
And I think we have seen the same with blockchain, for example, that everybody was talking about it, and customers were asking, so what is your approach with blockchain and so on?
Yeah.
And they now ask us about AI. I think it's going to be useful. But yeah, let's refer back to the different rate cards and different contracts and different type of invoices that you have. And logistics, it's not standardized, it's not structured. Data is often missing, and one of the prerequisites for this is that your data is good, and there's still a big world to win. And one of the other things that is connected, I would say, to almost the AI hype is in our world is API. So one extra letter, because everybody nowadays asks, so can we check your APIs? Where can we test it? How does it look like? Can you integrate with our systems? There's a lot of question about it, but in the end, very few are following through and implementing it. I think that it will definitely change, and it will be more. Mm-hmm. And I think that is going to be actually one of the big drivers to use AI, because when you have collaborative platforms or fully integrated platforms, So that means that you can receive more data than you can generate yourself, and you can get it in a high quality way. Then you can start to really use AI as well and say, okay, now we can put that on top of it. Now we can do more meaningful things. So I think one is going to be an accelerator for the other, but even with APIs, that is growing, but that still also needs a couple of years to further mature.
Yeah. Yeah, to be honest, with the API approach, I also have a lot of discussions with customers who are asking for API and who want to have a product that is fully to be integrated. But in the end, very few people are really doing it right from the beginning. So everybody wants the option to have an API and to connect it to all the systems, but very few are actually doing it. Of course, also because of the IT capacity on the shipper side or warehouse side, whatever. But that's also a trend I see, that everybody talks about it, but few implementing it.
Yeah, they see basically the same.
One use case I could at least imagine for Freightender would be, for example, that I upload a rate sheet and it automatically fills the tender. But that also, as you said, comes back to the correctness of data and order structure.
Yes, and that's something that we do today. So we integrate with, for example, Portrix, now owned by Descartes. So we can fetch the rates and pre-fill out of a rate database the tender, customer tender. So that's very nice, and that's something that we want to expand and use different sources for that. And you can also create your own rate database on our platform with, let's say, local charges that don't change so often. So the idea is for our forwarder solution to use as much as possible data sources to pre-fill that tender, let's say 80%, and then the rest can be done by the teams in the different countries to fill in the tender. And that's definitely something that is very important for the forwarders right now.
Oh yeah, that sounds really cool. That you actually pre-fill everything, and you just need to add your margin or add specific rates for parts of the transport. Okay. Yeah. Cool. Nice. And I mean, you already mentioned that you wanna somehow revamp the product or the user experience in October. Besides from that, is there anything you wanna or listeners can expect by Freightender in the coming year?
Yes, one of the big things we want to introduce is rate management for carriers. So we have rate management today, which is a tool that we developed early last year. So what does rate management mean? It's a platform where shippers can update the rates, have a rate calculator, can easily see what the price is for a certain shipment based on their own rates, but where you can also update the rates together with carriers. So carriers will have access to the system and can update their own rates, and that will be subject to approval by the shipper, of course.
Okay.
So you basically store the rates there, and the reasoning behind it is that after a tender, you still see rate updates, different charges coming in, or you add a couple of lanes, and you want to keep that all in one platform. Now, on the other side, what carriers don't have is access to software which actually keep those rates in a very flexible way. And we want to give them that option, so they can also seamlessly integrate with the rate management environment of their customers. So if a customer asks for new rates, or if a customer sends out a tender, they just connect rate management to that and fill that tender out of their own rate management system. Because we have learned that carriers don't keep their rates in one place, or always need to, I mean, a lot of road carriers, at least, they need to start from scratch whenever they fill in tenders. If you have an automated tool which doesn't cost you too much and it doesn't have the price of, let's say, an enterprise tool,
Mhm.
then that can be very attractive for mid-sized carriers or even smaller carriers.
Oh, that's very cool. And would the carriers then also, or could they only use these rates when they submit or bid via Freightender, or can they also somehow export it and send it to other customers?
Yeah, so it doesn't depend on our platform, so it's completely agnostic. So if they want to use it just for their customers who don't even use the tool, that's also fine. But then they could just upload the Excel file and fill that,
Yeah.
and then send it back to the customer. So it's really independent from any other tender platform. It's just purely rate management, because I think that is one of the growth areas for companies, because it's what you see in the media or on LinkedIn. It's all about rates, and it can be ocean rates and it can be roads rates, and how those rates are fluctuating. It's very hard to keep track of that, and carriers often have a problem in understanding at what level of rates did they win or did they lose the business. You need to keep this also to have an understanding. And then you know how you're going to quote for the next tender, for example. So some business intelligence around that is quite important. And if you can give this to carriers in a good package, I think it can be very attractive.
Yeah, sounds promising, definitely. Cool. As a last question, if you had a wish for the logistics industry, what would it be?
Spend more money on technology.
Okay. Somehow benefiting your company as well. But do you see a trend that there's anything changing? Would you say they're spending less than in the previous years, or?
No, we see definitely very, very strong growth. But it's still often, let's say, being decided on a traditional way where people say, oh, we need to make a return on investment case study, or we need to understand how fast we can get the money back. And I think that's a wrong consideration, because if you have people in tender management, smart people who are managing the process of making money for you, or making the right decisions and winning the tenders for you, and they have to do everything via Excel and email, and you don't want to give them technology because you cannot figure out the return on investment, then you take the wrong approach. Because I think that in a forwarder organization or in a carrier organization or on the shipper side in logistics, everything that you can automate and where it makes sense, you should do. And because you cannot calculate the exact ROI of it, it just makes sense to use tools. And nowadays you can buy tools for a fraction of what they would have been 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's just whatever that is, if that is in a procurement or in some chat function or in automated CMRs or you name it, it just makes sense to have tools in place that take over the dumb work that you have in logistics, because logistics is one of the areas where you have dumb work still being done by smart people, whereas you have manufacturing and these companies, they put out great products. I mean, cutting edge products. And then you come to the logistics area and it's all manual and it's outdated and it's old systems. And on top of that, the logistics market is just volatile, very dynamic and very complex.
Yeah.
So putting that all together, it just doesn't make sense that you don't invest in technology as much as you can.
Cool. That's, I think, a really good ending of the podcast episode. Pieter, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. Thanks a lot for sharing. And yeah, that's it. That's a wrap.
Yeah, thank you very much for being here. I really enjoyed it.
Cool. Thanks a lot. See you soon. Bye-bye, Pieter.
Bye-bye.
Damit sind wir schon wieder am Ende. Schön, dass du dran geblieben bist bis zum Schluss. Wenn dir die Folge gefallen hat, teile sie gerne mit deinen Freunden, in deinem Netzwerk, mit deinen Kollegen, wo auch immer du magst. Und wir freuen uns, wenn du das nächste Mal wieder einschaltest. Vielen Dank, bis dahin, ciao, ciao.